There are so many moments in life where women give away pieces of themselves not because they feel joy in giving, but because they feel they have to. They silence their own voice, their own needs, and their own desires just to make sure someone else feels satisfied, comfortable, or validated. It shows up in relationships when a woman says yes when she means no, when she gives affection without truly wanting it, when she goes along to keep the peace instead of speaking the truth. On the surface it looks like compromise or sacrifice, but underneath it is a pattern of self-betrayal that builds resentment and leaves her feeling invisible. This happens because of years of conditioning, because from an early age girls are taught to be polite, to be accommodating, to not make waves. They internalize this idea that being wanted is more important than wanting, that giving is more valuable than receiving, that serving someone else's needs proves their worth. And when that belief is carried into intimacy, it creates a lopsided dynamic where she performs rather than participates, where she gives out of obligation instead of desire. And here's the truth no one wants to say out loud: giving in this way doesn't create connection, it erodes it. It might keep things smooth in the short term, but it builds distance in the long run, because real intimacy can only grow in honesty. When a woman disconnects from what she really feels, she trains herself to numb her body, to silence her intuition, to stop trusting her own signals. That's why so many women go through the motions, offering touch, offering attention, offering their time, without actually being present. And the tragedy of this is that it doesn't just hurt her, it hurts the relationship. Because a partner can feel when someone is not fully there. They might not say it out loud, they might not admit it, but they sense it. And that gap, that absence, it creates a hollow space between two people who should feel close. So let's talk about why women do this. They do it because they're afraid of rejection, because they think if they don't give, they'll be left. They do it because they've been told that their pleasure matters less, that their comfort is secondary. They do it because they've been shamed for saying no, labeled as cold, selfish, or difficult. And so they learn that it's easier to comply than to resist. But every time they do, they chip away at their own sense of self. They teach themselves that their body doesn't belong to them, that their needs don't matter, that silence is safer than honesty. And that's a lie that eats away at confidence and self-worth. The only way to break this cycle is to start telling the truth. To stop performing and start participating. To stop treating intimacy as a transaction and start treating it as a connection. That means asking yourself what you want, what you feel, what you need, and having the courage to voice it. Yes, it might disappoint someone. Yes, it might cause conflict. But it will also create authenticity, and authenticity is the foundation of real love. Because love isn't about one person always giving and the other always taking. Love is about reciprocity, about meeting in the middle, about two people showing up as their full selves without fear. When a woman reclaims her voice, she reclaims her body. When she chooses to only give from a place of genuine desire, she restores balance. And when she insists on being seen, heard, and respected, she stops living on autopilot and starts living with intention. This isn't just about sex or affection, it's about every area of life. Because the pattern of self-betrayal that shows up in intimacy is the same pattern that shows up at work when she stays quiet in meetings, or at home when she carries the invisible load of everyone else's needs. And the shift that happens when she starts telling the truth in one area ripples into every other area. The question to ask is simple but powerful: am I doing this because I want to, or because I feel I have to? That single pause, that single act of reflection, can change everything. Because once you realize how much of your life has been shaped by obligation, you can start rewriting it with intention. And that's when connection becomes real, because nothing is more magnetic than someone who knows their own worth and refuses to shrink it. Women often give out of obligation rather than genuine desire, and this truth is far more common than most people want to admit. Think about the countless times a woman has said yes when she actually wanted to say no, the moments she has leaned into a kiss, accepted a touch, or gone further than she really wanted just because she felt like it was expected of her. This is not about enjoyment, not about mutual connection, not about authentic intimacy. It is about fulfilling an unspoken duty, about keeping the peace, about avoiding conflict, about making sure someone else doesn't feel rejected. It is an invisible weight that so many women carry, one that convinces them that their own comfort and their own feelings come second to someone else's satisfaction. And when this happens, intimacy becomes less about choice and more about performance, less about joy and more about obligation. The reason this happens runs deep. From a very young age, many women are conditioned to prioritize others before themselves. They are praised for being sweet, polite, agreeable, and accommodating. They are warned not to be selfish, not to be too outspoken, not to be too demanding. Over time, this message seeps into their sense of self. It tells them that their value is tied to what they give, not who they are. So when intimacy enters the picture, whether in the context of a long-term relationship or something new, that same conditioning shapes how they show up. They believe that saying yes, even when their body or heart isn't aligned, is the safe choice, the right choice, the choice that keeps the relationship intact. The problem is that obligation kills desire. When someone gives out of duty instead of genuine want, the energy changes. Intimacy stops being about connection and becomes an act of compliance. Instead of feeling alive, she feels hollow. Instead of feeling empowered, she feels diminished. Instead of walking away with warmth, she walks away with resentment. And resentment is a slow poison. It doesn't always show up immediately, but it builds in the background, growing heavier each time she ignores her own truth in order to protect someone else's feelings. Over time, that resentment can transform into distance, disconnection, even contempt. What's dangerous is how normalized this has become. Society often frames women's self-sacrifice as noble, as romantic, as evidence of love. Stories, movies, cultural narratives, they glorify the woman who gives and gives, who bends and compromises, who places everyone else's needs above her own. But what gets lost is the cost of this cycle. A woman who constantly gives out of obligation erodes her relationship with herself. She stops trusting her intuition. She dulls her own desires. She convinces herself that her body's signals are wrong or inconvenient. And once you disconnect from your own inner voice, it becomes harder and harder to know what you actually want, because you're so used to focusing on what someone else expects. And let's be honest, this doesn't just harm her, it harms the relationship too. Partners can feel when something is off. Even if they don't acknowledge it directly, they sense when someone is going through the motions instead of fully engaging. They notice the lack of spark, the absence of authenticity, the missing enthusiasm. And while they might not say it out loud, that absence leaves a void. Genuine intimacy requires mutual presence, mutual desire, mutual participation. Without that, it becomes one-sided, and one-sided intimacy is unsustainable. So why do women continue to give out of obligation? Because fear is powerful. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being judged. Fear of being called selfish, cold, difficult, or unloving. Because too often when women set boundaries, they are punished for it, socially, emotionally, even physically. So they learn that compliance feels safer than honesty. They tell themselves that it's easier to just give in than to risk the fallout of saying no. But that safety is an illusion. Each time they choose silence over truth, they reinforce the idea that their worth is conditional, that they must trade authenticity for acceptance, that their body is not fully their own. This pattern doesn't appear only in the bedroom. It spills into every other part of life. The woman who says yes when she wants to say no in intimacy is often the same woman who stays late at work even when she's exhausted, the same woman who takes on extra responsibilities at home because she doesn't want to be seen as failing, the same woman who agrees to favors for friends even when she has nothing left to give. The root is the same: obligation over desire, expectation over authenticity, silence over truth. And the longer this continues, the more she loses touch with the very core of who she is.